Real quick before we start, it is about that time again. The beginning of the next month is coming, and that means another Q&A. There's a pinned comment in the comments where you can leave your questions. And without further ado, let's get back to the video. Today on RPG Horror Stories, we have a Dungeon Master self-insert that the DM uses to flirt with a player character who he forces to be this self-insert's love interest. Without further ado, let's get started. Not nearly as horrific as some of the stories I've seen on here, but there are a lot of similar things that I notice a few other people experience too, and whoo boy, does it still annoy me to this day. We started a new 5e campaign with a new DM, former player in the group, but first time DMing our group in particular. The premise was that everyone had been mind wiped and woke up together in this dungeon with no idea who or what our characters were, figuring out our appearances, our classes, stats, etc. All was a really interesting idea to me. We fought goblins, barely escaped, and started to learn little details about our characters. It was genuinely a lot of fun, and we were all really excited to step into the story. And then the DMPC showed up. He was intentionally vague and smug, very tall, dark, and OP vibes. Every check rolled against him instantly failed. None of us trusted him as far as we could spit, and we figured that was the point. My PC, a half-elf, and another player's character, a halfling, shared that look of, he's going to be the big bad, isn't he? And mutually decided to keep an eye on him. The DMPC sent us on a chain of MacGuffin quests wherein we'd occasionally stumble upon more information about our pasts. As these quests continued, the DMPC continues to randomly show up, usually trailing the party at a distance, showing up in alleyways, etc. All suitably creepy things befitting a future villain. My half-elf and the halfling struck up a close friendship, and while most of the other PCs either didn't notice or don't care about the DMPC's weird hovering, most of the PCs had an intelligence score of 10 or less, so the PCs were appropriately naive, which was hilarious, but also oof. The pair of us always made sure to keep track of everything he said or did, and he always talked to my player character. It was always her that was asked to make the perception roll to see if he would be noticed, always her that he approached regardless if the party was split up or all together, and my PC hated this guy's guts. She was supposed to be neutral but driven and hate people who looked down on others, and that's how the DMPC acted. So she naturally was not a fan of him and his brooding, snarky treatment to the rest of the party. Time goes on, the quests continue, and eventually we stumble into a city/market where the people recognize my half-elf. Everyone is immediately asking about her and the DMPC, how he's doing, and that they're surprised to see her without him, etc. And naturally, she's very confused. Information digging ensues. Turns out, she traveled with this guy a lot, and no one knows or is willing to say much else. Okay, cool, so all that stalking and attempts at conversation make a bit more sense. They knew each other before. Next time the DMPC shows up, she treats him exactly the same as she had been before, and he gets increasingly more frustrated. Meaning the DM is really getting increasingly more frustrated. It's kind of how it works with self-inserts. The DM asks me out of game what the deal is, and my PC is still treating theirs so badly after finding out that they used to know each other. I responded honestly that my PC doesn't trust him. She doesn't have her memories. She only knows him as he is now, and as of now, he's a dick. She doesn't like him, and that's not going to change because some random people keep asking how their travels are going. The DMPC starts showing up more frequently. Now, he flat out ignores the rest of the party to the point of just ridiculousness. He won't accept the quest tokens from them, won't speak with them, or make eye contact. We were given an amulet to call for his aid if we needed help, and it suddenly stopped working unless it was my character who used it. Encounters that were already poorly scaled to begin with became impossible. We were barely level 6 and facing multiple monsters at a time with ACs over 20 and resistances to every type of damage in the book. We approached the DM about it and were told that this was the reason we had the amulet, so use it. My half-elf is a weird homebrew necromancer of the DM's making, and the DMPC starts giving her crazy buffs and items that only she can use. The rest of the party is naturally starting to get frustrated when almost every encounter is a near TPK where only my half-elf is conscious to save the day. My PC and the halfling decide to break off from the party to do some research on their own, hoping out of game that this will keep the rest of our group safe from terrible encounters. The two of them travel around for a bit, trying to find a way to trap or do something to this DMPC, only for the halfling to magically vanish? Poof! My half-elf tries to find him, but no checks she makes, even nat 20s, give any information. No one in any town nearby knows him, has seen him, or has any idea where he is going. So she tries to return to the rest of the party who, surprise, surprise, she also cannot find any trace of. So she has to beg the DMPC to bring her back to them. And he does, smugly thanking her for her groveling and making comments about how much he prefers her like this. And where is the party? Somewhere hidden and terrible? Nope, they're just in another city that they have already been through multiple times, that the party collectively owns a house in. A place obviously she could never have traced them to on her own. And now magically the halfling PC has a long-lost wife and a whole brood of children in that same city. He'd been zapped back to his family home by some sort of summoning spell, and that was why he vanished. Our halfling keeps trying to leave, saying he doesn't remember this family and really doesn't care much about them. The family is horrifically upset and begs him to stay, begs him not to give up on his loving home to go off gallivanting with a half-elf of all things. And the DMPC talks to him for the first time in literal months of in and out of game time to call this guy heartless and a whole slew of other insults. Our party leaves the town and is promptly attacked by a spirit of greed, as you do. Another near total knockout ensues, and so goes the pattern. Finally, the day comes and the DMPC reveals himself as the big bad. We manage to destroy a talisman controlling his armies and call on the power of every ally we've made throughout the campaign. The DMPC shows up, furious, and wipes out almost the entire party in a single round. Only 2 members of the party survive in the end, with one, of course, being my half-elf. The DMPC vanishes with an evil laugh, and the DM closes out the campaign by saying we stopped the evil, but didn't defeat the villain, that the world was safe, but we sacrificed ourselves to get there. Which, okay, fine, but then they decide to share all our collective backstories, as we would have reclaimed our memories as we fought the creature that took them. Most were mundane nobles who disappeared looking for a higher purpose, traveling merchants with a chip on their shoulder, all very PG, cookie-cutter origins, which could have been fine. But then there was my half-elf. She's apparently been a victim of horrible physical and sexual abuse all her life, which was explained in graphic detail. Never do that. I'll say more during the analysis, but never do that. It's so bad, I'm just going to say it in the middle of the story. That is probably one of the worst things you can do as a DM. Anyway, we'll continue. She'd only been saved a few years prior by the kind-hearted DMPC who arrived on the scene, slew her captors, and absconded with her into the night. They'd traveled together that entire time, saving people and growing closer. She was supposed to be endlessly devoted to him, practically tripping over herself to earn his approval. And then he'd gone and cast some BS spell that accidentally took her memories from her alongside all the other PCs, and boom, here they were. And this whole time, his jackassery and snark was his way of showing how much he missed their time together and how upset he was that she refused to love him again, even though he so clearly cared about her. The DM went on to describe everyone's futures, particularly the exact tortures that the halfling was facing in hell, which apparently he ended up in after he died. Practically every other member of the group was dead and shoveled off into their little corner of the afterlife. The other surviving member, besides my PC, a half-orc, returned to his family, grew old, and just died. And then my half-elf was doomed to spend the rest of her life wandering around alone, struck with horrible PTSD from her childhood filled with abuse, before eventually being found once more by the DMPC, and who even knows, I stopped listening, I was so furious. We'd all collectively tried talking to this DM throughout the campaign about the difficulty of roles, the unfairness and inflexibility of the plot, and the clear favoritism of this DMPC towards my PC. How everyone felt that they were just the side characters in what was pretty much amounted to the half-elf story. Everyone had just sort of tolerated it. We complained to each other on the side, but mostly just shrugged it off as, at least none of us have to worry about DM work this time, I guess. But yeah, that ending, it sent people reeling. I've never seen people walk out of a D&D session before, but everyone pretty much just stood up without a word and left. Needless to say, we haven't played with this person since, but yikes, it was a wild ride. I guess the take home is that if you think the DM or their PC is being weirdly obsessive about a character for no other reason than just because, you need to get the hell out before you get sucked into acting as the long-suffering love interest of their self-insert. TLDR, DMPC was obsessed with my half-elf player character that the DM themselves made for a memory loss campaign. When she ignored the DMPC, the rest of the party was punished, TPK'd repeatedly, and eventually all permakilled, at which point the DM revealed the half-elf had been previously saved by the DMPC from a lifetime of abuse, and would now wander the world alone and miserable forever until he found her again and she accepted him. Okay, that was horrible. Probably one of the worst DMPCs we've ever had in this entire video series. Probably one of the worst DMs we've ever had in this entire video series. For starters, just because you are comfortable with a topic such as sexual assault, this doesn't mean that you can include it in your campaign without any consequences. If you're going to include something that could potentially harm someone emotionally, just check up with your players. It's not hard to do. Always just check. Not everyone thinks alike or has the same story. Have a discussion with your players about the kind of content you're going to include. It's really important. It's very simple, it's very easy, but very important just to check. Not caring about player mental safety is clearly not the only problem with this DM. Look, self-inserts and forcing a player to be a love interest, that is bad. Very, very bad. I like to leave romance options open. It's something that I'm personally not very good at playing out, but I leave it open. However, the players need to actively pursue it themselves. There has to be a choice that they make. A romance option is never ever something I would give to a player or try to force a player to accept. That is absolutely, well, I'll be quite frank, creepy and weird. It's bad. Don't do that. Lastly, this is more of a common thing than the other two, but try not to focus on one PC. Obviously, this DM is focusing on one PC for a very creepy reason, but a lot of other DMs focus on one PC for more innocent things, like for example, a player being better at accents or better at roleplay will cause DMs to show a little bit of favoritism. Don't do this either. It's really important to accept everyone in your game, to treat everyone fairly, and to allow everyone to have fun. People aren't going to get better at roleplaying if they don't get opportunities to roleplay because you're showing favoritism to one player. It's a very easy trap to fall into. Yeah, combine all of these issues, and this DM is probably one of the worst we've had on the entire channel. But despite that, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of RPG Horror Stories. If you did enjoy it, then please do leave a like to let me know. If you want to see more episodes of RPG Horror Stories from me, then please do hit that subscribe button. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.